What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Talk of the Tundra. As always, I am your host, Numac, and joining me is Jordan Tresky. Jordan, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good. Doing good. Been nice to take a little bit of a break during the playoffs, watch some football, and not to think about the Packers, but alas, we're back at it and talking about some Aaron Rodgers, obviously. That's the whole offseason narrative right now, as well as some coaching changes that are on the horizon for this Packers team. But before we get into all that, want to do a little promotion for you guys. Try to get you guys over to Repod. Join us over on Repod. We are building a nice little community over there, talking about podcasts across all of the um, GSPN podcasts, essentially. Talking about Bucks and their push towards the All-Star break and subsequently the playoffs afterwards. Spurs offseason wrapping up in about a month as pitchers and catchers report, as well as just make time for this and all the pop culture things over there. So, good time. Really good time. We enjoyed. Jordan and I've been posting over there quite regularly. Thanks for this issue of linguistics with Numac. And yeah, come join us. Repod.com/talk of the tundra, I believe, if that's right, Jordan. Correct me
I
if I'm
believe
wrong.
so. Yeah.
So yeah, come join us over on Repod. But without further ado, I think we hop right into the news. The latest and greatest.
News.
um, First and foremost, we should talk about the actual coach that's leaving. I should say actual, they're both actually coaches. But the for sure thing, um, Joe Gray, the defensive backs coach for the Packers, has accepted a new position with the Falcons. I believe it was like their um defensive coordinator, like similar-ish type thing.
It
Or-
wasn't a
Also,
lateral.
Jerry Gray, not Joe Gray, Jerry Gray.
I at first it looked like it was a lateral move, but I believe it has been since confirmed that he will also be the associate head coach, which I would imagine that makes him the number two.
Yeah. Uh, Michael Rothstein from ESPN. Michael Falcons hired Jerry Gray to be assistant head coach slash defense.
Mm.
So like, it's an interesting way to kick off your offseason as the Falcons. Because like, I forget who's their coach there.
Arthur Smith, who
That's
worked
isn't he the
with
owner?
Arthur Blank. That's Arthur
That's
Blank.
the owner. Okay.
A lot of Arthurs. He worked with Jerry Gray somewhere down the line. I'm forgetting what the team was. Maybe
Mm,
Washington.
okay. Interesting. I just like as for Jerry Gray, like obviously he was like been a long time assistant with multiple teams. It feels like a step up, but I also am curious about the fit in general of being an assistant head coach. I guess that's more of an NFL question than it is actually like a strictly Jerry Gray move.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a step up for him. It's what it is he. So is he the defensive coordinator? Right.
I don't. That's a great question because like the article said assistant coach, head coach slash defense. Like I just don't know what to call his new position.
Assistant head coach slash defense. This is
That's what I'm
because
saying, Doc.
I'm gazumped right now.
It's just
Um, yeah, it is. That is very interesting.
so.
Either
Um,
way, I do think it's a step up.
yeah,
I
I
do
think it's a
think
step
that
up for him. I guess. How do you feel about him leaving? I'm not too sad about it.
I wouldn't say I'm sad, but I think it's one of those things where he came to Green Bay, was here the last 3 years, to put a time reference on it. That coincides with not only drafting Eric Stokes, picking up Rasul Douglas, but Jair Alexander thriving as an all pro corner. Um, Stokes really looking good in his rookie year, not so much, this last year, but until injury struck. Rasul Douglas finding lightning in a bottle with Green Bay.
Right.
just go on and down the line, like throw in Adrian Amos, who has been really good with the Packers by and large. I
Hmm.
mean, um, I it's hard to kind of branch out from okay, this is a really good position head coach. How does he get that to happen in under his new title as assistant head coach slash defense?
Right.
How does that translate into 11 people on the field instead of just secondary or whatever it is? But for the specific job that he had, like the Packers clearly had success when he was here. So
Do you think so?
I would say so.
I'm in between the Packers secondary having success under Jerry Gray because I think like he was able to motivate the guys when he needed to, but there was a lot of ugliness on that defense earlier this year. And I think like a lot of that comes from coaching, and it's not to say that the defense was like the downfall of the 2019, 2020, or the 2019, 2020, and 2021 teams, but I still feel like there was definitely some missed assignments, and I think that since that is his area of expertise, right? Like was his job. That losing people on zone coverages and handoffs and things like that is directly kind of tied to him, as well as Joe Barry. But being
Yeah,
the coach that is supposed to be coaching like that specific technique and um scheme, I think that since it being bad for the first 6, 8 games of the season is kind of an indictment on Jerry Gray. I guess just this season. So I'm not like that's why I'm not too sad he's leaving because I want to see another position coach in there that hopefully can shore up those deficiencies in that secondary.
yeah. I don't think your point is off. I mean, obviously, this season was what it was, and the defense wasn't great. It's hard to because we don't know the inner workings of a coaching room
Right.
and how much of the scheme stuff is on Jerry Gray slash a positions head coach or positions coach versus the overarching person that's seeing it all, like Joe Barry or even to an extent LaFleur.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it's going to be in the middle. It's going to be a gray area, Jerry gray area. So you just kind of have to find where the truth, I guess, or the blame lies in this situation. But
Right.
I would say by and large, this year or parts of this year notwithstanding, you had guys play at all pro levels at different positions. And some of that is definitely and across two different defensive coordinators too.
Right.
Because Jerry Gray was here when Mike Penn was here too.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something to be said about that too. So yeah, is it going to be a big blow? Who's to say? But this is the second straight year where Packers are losing key coaching talents. Probably more surprising that was on the defensive side of the ball for some people, I would imagine. But
Right.
these guys are professionals.
Mm-hmm.
They'll do the best that they can with what they work with, and then you hope that a team like the Falcons, who are clearly rebuilding, and you kind of have a longer runway to kind of like put your imprint on it, on the program. Yeah, I think it's a better opportunity for Jared Gray, but I would be interested to see where the Packers go to
Mm-hmm.
fill his shoes.
Right. I think it'll be a quite important hire regardless because their strength is on that is in that secondary with how much they've invested, um, draft stock wise as well as just um money from the free agent like class and things like that. Like I think that's definitely an important aspect of that defense is the secondary, or I guess of the Packers defense. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see who they hire. Um, yeah, I'll be curious. I already made my argument about about Jay Gray. We don't gotta litigate it again. Should we move on to the next possible coaching change?
Yes.
The Colts. are possibly, maybe, we'll see. Conduct a
Have you been interviewed for the Colts head coaching job?
I did ignore a spam call today from Indianapolis, so maybe that was them calling. So maybe I fumbled the bag there.
You had Jim Irsay on the line and
Oh,
you just blocked it.
maybe he was trying to see if I want to bake some cookies with some powdered sugar or something. I don't know. Um, the Colts are possibly maybe having a third round of interviews after an extensive second round of interviews. Um, it looks like they brought back obviously Aaron Glenn from the Lions, and they were scheduled to fly out Shane Steichen from the Eagles. I think this weekend, according to this Indy Star um, article. But before that, they obviously interviewed Jeff Saturday, who was their interim coach, Broncos D coordinator Ihiro Evero, Rams D coordinator Raheem Morris, Giants defensive coordinator Wink Martindale, and uh, the this article got it wrong. Packers special teams coach Rich Bisaccia. They put Raiders in there. I was like, that's different. Um, as well as Bengals offensive coordinator Brian Callahan. So big search for this job, which is interesting given the state of that team. But I think given Rich Bisaccia's head coaching tenure in Vegas when he was interim coach for John Gruden, and how well that team played under him and how much the players liked him, I'd be not surprised if he landed that job. But I'd also be equally sad to see him leave Green Bay after only a year because he really made that special teams unit a major factor after it had been a problem for multiple years.
So let's flip the table here. If Biasaccia leaves, if he gets his head coaching gig,
Yep.
do you think that's a big loss?
I do think it's
How,
a big
how big of
loss.
a loss is that?
I think it's significant. Like he's been a special teams coordinator for a while. He was the special teams coordinator in Vegas before he got that interim job. Um, and I think we saw it this year with just how good they were in the kick return game with Keyshawn Nixon back there as well. But just in general, I feel like it looked a lot better than it did in years past. I wasn't thinking about it. Was and like in a negative way was the main takeaway and how I felt about it. And I think that that's as best you can do for like special teams um hopes, right? Like you can't hope for them to hold the guy on a kickoff return to the 15-yard line every time or punt the ball inside the 5 every time. Like that's just it's not a realistic ask. And it's also not his job to make Pat O'Donnell punt it 75 yards when they go 3-0 on the 25-yard line. So I think he did a good job this year. I really do. And I think that if he would leave, I would sincerely doubt we find a coach as good as he is at coaching special teams to make that unit equal to what it was this year next year.
Yeah, I mean it's clear. He brought in a lot of his own guys from the Raiders. Keyshawn Nixon being one of them.
Yep.
Dallin Levitt,
Yep.
Lovett. There's one other guy too from the Raiders.
Yeah, we always forget his name.
Yeah.
We always get those two. Then we
Yeah.
forget the other one.
But it's as you mentioned, it's one of those things where you're anonymous. If nothing happens, then great. Or nothing bad happens, then great. Like it's one of those things where you can't just you can't assume that they're gonna hold them late or late. At like I'm just basically repeating the point that you just made, but like special teams is just a very like all or nothing of like if it's really disastrous, as we've seen very recently before Rich Bisaccia. Yeah, we've gone through the story of Packers not really investing much into it, whether it's coaching or just picking up guys that they that are basically just special teamers, and then something like this happens where you get Bisaccia and then you catch lightning in a bottle with Keyshawn Nixon, and how much that changed their season from seeing how much Amari Rodgers struggled for the first 10 weeks of the year,
Hmm.
changed everything significantly. We know how the story ended, but Nixon was as big of a reason as why the Packers, turned their season around for at least a couple of weeks. So yeah, it would be a bummer. But I don't know. I don't know what they made such a point of going after him in the first place because it was really I think we forget about it now, but it was kind of touch and go at some points because it was just a matter of like he might get another job because of how well the Raiders gig basically taking over for Gruden,
Right.
how well he did, and then it was like a coup that they got him, and then but you kind of go into it like expecting he's not going to be here for long, right?
Right.
So yeah, based on where the Colts are, it seems like a job that would kind of fit with what they want, but
Hmm.
also I didn't anticipate them firing Frank Reich and then going to someone that was not a professional football head coach by any means
Right.
mid-season.
I'm also like maybe I'm chalked and just had a totally wrong feel about the special teams. But PFF had the Packers like special teams like ranking like almost near the bottom. They were 26th in ranking according to PFF. I feel like they're a lot better than that. Like I just I don't think I'm gonna take that too much into account, but it just felt like they were better than 26th and like grade wise, obviously.
I guess, yeah, it'd probably be worth we get our grades, our red pens out.
Yep.
Um, it'll be worth seeing how they break that down because there's 10 weeks of pure bad special teams that would bring that grade down. But then how
Right.
great is it the case of just Keyshawn Nixon alone lifting that up, even though Mason Crosby had a really strong last few weeks too.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know what all the factors go into all of that, I guess.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. But yeah, I think in general that if Rich Bisaccia does get picked to coach the Colts, that we need to focus as like a fan base and hopefully the Packers focus on too in their preparation for next season. Just the general more brain drain from the team again. Like that'd be two
Yeah.
more coaching losses in 1 year. Like you're always gonna have likely some coaching turnover every year, but I think that was one of the underrated parts we talked about during the season was that sometimes it just looked like they had lost a few coaches over the offseason and then didn't really take that into account. So I think that will need to be a point of um what's the word? Why my brain my brain's not working.
Point of
Emphasis. There we
yeah,
go.
there we go.
There we go. A point of emphasis for the team just making sure that they hire the right people because who knows if they did this offseason, like Adam Stenovich going from offensive line coach to offensive coordinator to replace Nathaniel Hackett is certainly a choice. I think it worked out fine, but was there a better option out there? Maybe. So I think that's just something to think about, and hopefully they try to find external candidates rather than promote internally. Is my opinion on that.
Mm, that's a yeah, that's a good shout because we dealt with that all last year
Yeah.
and to mixed success. How and the other thing factor as we will probably get into now, there are personnel changes that could easily vary on how do you really assess someone like Adam Stenovich or
Right.
um
Matt LaFleur's play calling.
yeah, because things are just naturally just going to change. We all know that in some it could be easily in a blockbuster type way or it's more subtle. But
Right.
yeah.
So that is all on the coaching stuff, but I think we ought to hop into the meat of this offseason narrative already, and will be for quite some time, I believe. And that is obviously number 12, Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers watch.
Do 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 do. I think it's just easiest to start with, like, just chronologically. I believe it was earlier this week. I think Schefter reported
It
it
was
first.
Sunday
Yeah, it was
before
Sunday.
the conference championships.
Yep. Um, Rodgers, or sorry, my back up. Adam Schefter, um, believed that a trade was like the most likely um option for Aaron Rodgers this offseason. Go ahead.
Schefter reported
Yes.
that league sources. So let's just
Yes. Okay.
the words here are very key.
That is
Sorry,
a very good
not to
point.
be that guy.
So, yeah, no, I'll just read the paragraph from Schefter's article. Um, a scenario that once seemed unthinkable, a Rodgers trade could be driven by reasons. My word, the state of the Packers franchise, and ultimately the feelings of the team and the star quarterback. I think that last part is the most interesting part of this latest news. But league sources believe the franchise prefers to move on from Rodgers, just as it once did with Brett Favre. And those sources also believe that Rodgers is well aware of the Packers' feelings on the situation. So that's interesting for a few reasons. The first of it is that the league sources means this probably is a little muddy, but I wonder if league sources, I hate doing this conjecture, but like think that them calling on what they're willing to offer for Rodgers is the same as them being they want to move on from him. Like, there's a difference between wanting to move on and doing due diligence? And based on what Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur have said during the season, I think it would probably be within the fans and ours best interest to assume this is due diligence rather than trying to move on.
Belief.
Yeah.
I am right there with you. This is a very NBA like reporting. League sources is the key here. It's carrying a lot of water. Um,
Schefter?
I
Never. Never. Never ever.
he never mind. So I think both things can be true.
Hmm.
And again, I think the messenger here kind of looms large because Adam Schefter was also the same person who broke the news almost two drafts ago
Yep.
of Aaron Rodgers kind of wanting out, but not really. And it was very clear that Adam Schefter is very good buddies with his agent.
Right.
So how do you like knowing how that was? And that was the other thing too. When all that stuff happened, Rodgers didn't really deny that.
Right.
And I guess I'll save my thoughts for that when we get to his rebuttal, I guess.
Right.
But when you kind of take in all of that together, it makes it even more muddier of like makes it muddier, but also we all know how things are going to be initiated if it actually goes to plan.
Right. I think I don't like believing Schefter because he's kind of a worm at times. But I think where there's like smoke, there's fire kind of thing. And I think that's just the Packers doing their due diligence. So at the same time, we can, I guess, move to the next report because it kind of goes into the same idea because Rodgers had a rebuttal to this as well. Um, Ian Rapoport said on the Pat McAfee show that his
Colbert Rapoport.
that
Sorry.
his educated guess is that Rodgers quotes stays if he wants to. So like if Rodgers wants back, then the Packers will bring him back. That's Rappaport's educated guess, not sourced. Um, but then also on the Pat McAfee show, Rodgers talked about how he wasn't in those. He said, "quote It sounds like they're already having holy moly, back up. It sounds like there are already conversations going on that aren't involving me, which is interesting." And to that I say, not every conversation is going to include Aaron Rodgers. I think that's like the biggest annoyance with that quote itself, just because
Of course.
like they're not going to sit there and debate whether or not they should trade you Rodgers in front of you. Like they're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
His quote continues, honestly, I've been insulated to a lot of that. I'm not part of those conversations right now. When I make up my mind one way or another, then you guys and the Packers, not in that order, everybody else will know at some point. So, um, he basically called it all conjecture until he makes up his mind. So it seems like he's still thinking about retiring. It's all up in the air right now. But I think it Rapoport and um, Schefter are like two of the most plugged in guys in the NFL. I think that's fair to say amongst like the national beat reporters. Um, and it's kind of two conflicting reports. Not and like one is sourced obviously in one's opinion, but you gather an opinion from
Do you think it's
talk.
conflicting? I don't
Kind
think it
of.
is.
I think it kind of is.
I think it's essentially saying the same thing, but in contradictory language.
I
Because
think
Rapoport's thing is Rodgers will stay in Green Bay if he wants to.
right.
And
That so like I think that's the thing is that Rodgers will stay in Green Bay if he wants to, versus what we already know from the Packers is that like from the organization like itself, not sources, not reports, like
yeah,
from the organization, from Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur, that they want him back. So like that together to me is one report. But then Schefter saying that league sources believe that the franchise prefers to move on is the other side of that. Like if they prefer to move on, then they move on. Like they had that option. Does that make sense? And like why I think they're conflicting?
yes. Here, let me. I'm reading Schefter's thing again
Okay.
because um sorry, this is a podcast and I'm
No,
losing my
it's
train
fine.
of
I,
thought.
I I just think that I think they're conflicting because the Packers have the choice to move on from him if they want. That's like that resources aside from Schefter, that's their prerogative if they want it to be. But they also think that if they want Rodgers back, they can just keep him. They don't gotta do any of this. Unless like Rodgers demands a trade, which I don't think he'll do. Um but I think that's where the rub is, right? League sources versus opinion from Rapoport. I think they're both like I think Schefter might have sourced his, obviously, league sources. I think Rapoport is plugged in enough to have been talking around the league and just knows what the buzz is currently and just isn't putting sources to it because it's just he's called it an educated guess.
The sentence that Schefter has in his report that makes me think that it's basically saying the same thing, but not. Or yeah, a scenario that once seemed unthinkable, a Rodgers trade could be driven by financial reasons, the state of the Packers franchise, and ultimately the feelings of the team and the star quarterback. So it's as much as it is as in that excerpt, it's painting it as a financial reason why they would do this.
I think it's all four of those things. It's financial reasons, the state of the franchise, the feelings of the team, and the feelings of Rodgers.
The and in of those four reasons, the biggest would be by far, it's not even close, the feelings of the star quarterback.
Right. Like those
Because
weigh.
like
Yeah, like Rodgers' feelings hold the most weight in this entire scenario. Like clearly, because if he's doesn't want to get traded to whomever bad team we'll talk about in a minute, he'll just retire, and then that'll
yeah.
nix that trade. But like I guess go on with your
At the
with your
same
point.
time, that bad team could also be the Packers because they're gonna have to shed salary. I know
Right.
the salary cap projections came out too, and did not really do much of anything from what I've gathered on after
Yeah, it
that
didn't like do them any
list.
favors. They got a lot of money. They got more money. They got like 20 million more, I believe, but I think that was projected anyways. So
Yeah,
the same scenarios that were necessary for the the same scenarios that the Packers had before the season ended, like reworking Jair's deal, reworking Devondre's deal, Aaron Jones's deal, Bakhtiari's deal, all that stuff still applies week 18 as it did today.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I we'll talk about this until we're blue in the face
Yeah.
because this is your wish of this being sorted out as quickly as possible has not come to pass.
Yeah, I still don't think it gets resolved for at least another month. Like it doesn't there's
Yeah,
no really point to it. Like I think there's not gonna be any news. I hope there is soon. That's that's beside the point. I hope there is news sooner rather than later, but I think like the most predictable time for news is draft night. Like I think that's just the easiest way to do it.
draft night.
Yeah, because
What about free agency?
I think any trade um that revolves around Rodgers is going to need to include picks this year and probably next year. And um any team that's looking to get a quarterback in free agency will probably call on Rodgers, but at the same time they know that that option is like there until it's not. And I don't think the quarterback free agent market is very good this offseason, frankly.
Um, the fact that the Raiders and 49ers were talked about as a destination for a since retired Tom Brady makes it so that it was probably not that great.
No,
Jimmy Garoppolo might be the best option.
right. And I think like part of that too is just that like any team, any quarterback worth being like going to get on the free agent market is going to be like franchise tagged, like Lamar Jackson is going to be. Like I just think that's pretty simple in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I again, the ball is in Aaron Rodgers' court, and as much as he will make it sound like he's grandstanding and there's no decision made, blah blah blah, blah, it does seem like it. Your point of he doesn't have to be in the room or be in touch about every single little thing that is going on with the Packers franchise.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh
his
yeah.
agent can things can be delegated or things can be tabled in a way where it's like you're running through all these different scenarios to try to keep the band together.
Right.
And if the moment that he says, I want to be else, I want to play elsewhere, I want to finish my career elsewhere, then you deal with plan B or C, whatever that is.
Right.
So, yeah, it's not to repeat myself, but it is Aaron Rodgers' decision, and he will make it as painful as possible because
Right.
he doesn't do anything different.
Right. So quarterbacks available this offseason. Tom Brady, obviously, he's retired, not coming back. Um, Also, fun fact: Tom Brady had -1 rushing yards this season. I'm on Spotrac and I get like little stats, and that's one of them. Um, Geno Smith, he's re-signing with Seattle for all intents and purposes. That's not confirmed yet, but that's the feeling was that they're going to bring him back. Um, Daniel Jones is a free agent because the Giants didn't pick up his fifth-year option. Um, I think he returns to the Giants. Andy Dalton is a free agent. I don't think anyone was really relying on
He's
him.
always a free agent now.
Jimmy Garoppolo, obviously, Lamar Jackson's getting free agent or getting franchise tagged. Jacoby Brissett exists if you want to go down that route. Um, Taylor Heineke, like I think if they really want to go down that route, you can go down that route. Um, Sam Darnold, you can go down that route. You go down that route. Joe Flacco, if you want to go down that route, you can go down that route.
Mike White.
Yep. Cooper Rush is a free agent. He played well in Dak's absence this year. He might get a contract. Um, but after that, it gets pretty slim.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh,
so
I think it was slim.
it already is slim. Like outside of Jimmy Garoppolo, there really isn't anybody I'm betting on moving from that
And some of those
list.
guys are not going to have a job too because of the draft and everything like that too.
Right. Like I Gino, I don't think is going anywhere else. Daniel Jones not going anywhere else. If you go Andy Dalton, you don't know what you're doing. Um, and Jimmy Garoppolo, I think, is like the only one that's like a free agent quarterback that's like a Rodgers destination style like quarterback. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
if a team's going for Jimmy Garoppolo, they don't get him. They're probably also going for Aaron Rodgers.
Is he like a Tampa? Not to make that joke,
He
but
could, like
yeah, I
that.
mean,
It's not really a joke. I think he definitely could go to Tampa. Like I think that's a, they're probably looking into it.
yeah.
A lot of teams are. I know the Raiders are. I know the Niners probably want to sign him back. Um, or how I don't know what the Niners are going to do. They have three good quarterbacks apparently, and that's not a bad thing to have. But when you spend draft capital to draft Trey Lance and he gets hurt, and then his backup, Mr. Irrelevant, literally like opposite ends of the draft, is just as
Hmm.
good as them apparently. It's it's interesting. So it'll be a quarterback battle in training camp, that's for sure. So yeah, I just think that to get back to the point we started at, I don't think free agency is the biggest time that we'll expect Rodgers news because there just isn't purpose to it when the draft is a month later and the Packers just wait on offers. Because if there's four teams, five teams that all need a quarterback, like need a quarterback that are ready to compete right now, with a if they get a decent quarterback, which we'll talk about in a minute, um, there's still four others that don't get Jimmy Garoppolo. So we'll see.
Carousel. The carousel spins.
It do, it do we spinning. So should we talk about um Oh, also before we do that, I wanted to make um one mention of a Rodgers quote that he said in reaction to possibly being traded. If I can find it, but I'm looking like I can't find it. It was basically that he said, "Oh, here we go." Roger said, "This is from Schefter's article." Roger said during an interview this past week with the Pat McAfee show that he is quote open to all honest and direct conversations, and that a trade quote wouldn't offend me, and it wouldn't make me feel like a victim. So at least he's like open to that. Like he's not all hoity-toity about it. He's just like, if they trade me, they trade me, and there's no like hard feelings. I guess he's what he's saying publicly. Maybe he will have hard feelings privately, but at least he's saying that publicly. And he's
It's
not
hard
like,
not to,
oh
or
right,
yeah, I
like
mean,
totally
but
agree.
also, I don't know.
Right.
I I just make a fucking decision. Come on. Like
So
I just can't. I just it's one of those things where we talk about it for so long. So long. This is the third or fourth year that we're going on this.
yeah,
And pardon me if I've said this before, but the fact that we like dream up the scenarios of like what it's like when he's gone, then when it actually happens, whether that's being traded or retired,
yeah.
we've lived through these scenarios that it kind of loses its significance.
I still think it'll be a big day because
It'll be a big day, but it also like I just don't think those things just happen anymore. And
right.
maybe it's partially due to the people involved. I mean, you know, it is just hilarious, endlessly hilarious that he comes in here based on how everything ended with Favre.
Yeah, it really is a carbon copy.
And if not, I would say it's 10 times worse.
Then
Yeah, I mean,
Favre.
yeah.
What do you mean?
Cause
What is worse? Is my question.
I think it's not just the fact that Rodgers kind of twists the knife. It's also intertwined with the financial aspect of it where there is no clean break
How
in that sense.
did Rodgers twist the knife? Is my question from that sentence.
Well, I just think it happened. I mean, it twisting the knife for me is
Oh, I
the
see what
moment
you're saying.
the moment the season ends. It's like immediate of like you say all these great things about Green Bay and you want to be here. Then the moment the season ends, you're just like, well, we'll see what happens. And I genuinely think that a lot of it is retirement thoughts,
Yeah.
but I
I
don't. I don't know.
I guess I don't feel that way. I think that post Lions loss, he's probably a little emotional while not making the playoffs, and like I think he's just being candid. And I hate to
Yeah,
be protect and speaking for Aaron Rodgers and for
Lord knows he
defending
hates when people do that.
and defending him, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think he's like mad at the organization or anything like that. I just think that it was just the circumstances of when he was talking to the media at that point. Because like, yeah, he said all the
Oh,
great
of
things.
course.
He said all the great
Yes.
things about Green Bay throughout the end of the season, which we're annoyed about because it's like just make a decision kind of thing. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I just don't necessarily agree. But I do
I just
agree
think
that the
I think it's more of it's not necessarily my problem is just an Aaron Rodgers problem where it's like
right,
you point the fact that there's problems in how you're being talked about and all this stuff, and it's like you're the one that supplies this.
right,
Whether you think you could talk open and honestly and direct as much as you want, but you also know what's going to come of that because that's just how it is. And we all have
right,
frustrations with how he is covered too because of just again going through these scenarios where you're living him leaving the Packers before it actually happens.
right.
But it all starts from those things being said.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know,
I think that I don't think it was worse than Favre. I think it was like the situation with Favre was a little easier until it wasn't. Because the on off of Favre retiring every year for like 3 years was annoying, and I said that as a 9-year-old at the time.
yeah.
Or 10, 11, 12-year-old, I guess, because he retired, he left in 2008.
Oh wait,
Yeah, so 10, 11, 12-year-old. And so like it's as an adult now, it's just frustrating because you like obviously have more like awareness of it all. But even then, like Favre saying he's retiring after the end of the season and then coming back after like they've went on with this decision that he's gone and that it's now Rodgers' team. That part is just dramatic as is. And I think that's more dramatic than what this is. I think this is just a circumstance of all the news being available to us at all times, as opposed to before. It was mostly just the early parts of social media and Sports Center all day long.
yeah,
So I think
yeah.
we
They're
just
not flying Ed Werder into Green Bay to be like Brett
exactly
Favre gets up. I mean, the other thing too, the biggest difference is that because Ted Thompson stuck to his guns, they basically made Brett Favre retire,
right,
but he did not want to, which is
right,
a very key distinction that is likely not going to happen here. But you
right,
never know.
right. So should we go through trade landing spots? I think given our schedule, the next few weeks, we won't have a lot of time to talk about trade destinations. I think we ought to do that now
Yeah,
because between now and the draft, gets going pretty quick. With the combine, we're gonna do off-season grades the next 2 weeks for you guys. Um, off-season grades, as in grades for the offense and defense. Now that it is in the off-season, we'll do off-season grades for the NFC North and the rest of the NFC way in the future. But yeah, just offense defense grades will come in the next 2 weeks. And I think after that is the combine and the draft, free agency, all that stuff. So I think we ought to just get trade targets and landing spots done now.
mhm.
So let's start there. I think we'll start with the most reported and kind of I think it is the Vegas favorite. I think I
It
saw
is.
today is the
Yes.
New York Jets are the betting favorite for Aaron Rodgers to play next season or to be traded next. Or if he is traded, that's where he's going as the betting favorite. So um, the Jets obviously have a pretty talented team. They just barely missed the playoffs this year. I believe they finished with the same record as the Packers. They're one loss worse. It
One
looks like.
loss worse.
Yeah.
They lost their last 6 games.
Yikers.
Mhm.
Um. So yeah, 7-10. They currently hold the 13th pick, but that doesn't mean they don't have a good team. I think that This is the biggest example of plug and play Aaron Rodgers and playoff contender and like division contender. I won't say Super Bowl contender because we saw how he played this year, and if he doesn't play better than he played this year at the Jets, they're kind of in the same spot as the Packers were. Um, but going with a standout defense with now finishing his rookie year, Sauce Johnson, right? Yeah, or my
Yep. Gardner.
Sauce Gardner. Yeah, it's Gardner Johnson who's the Eagles cornerback. Sauce Gardner, and then Quentin Williams up front, along with on the offensive side a pair of stud wide receivers and Elijah Moore. And why is my brain not
Garrett
working?
Wilson.
Garrett Wilson, thank you. And Rookie of the Year candidate Brees Hall. Just a lot of raw talent on the Jets. And I think if you put Aaron Rodgers in that offense, he'd have a likelihood to succeed. But I think that's why they're the most attractive option um, for Rodgers to go to if he's traded, as well as the Packers because he's not in division or not in conference. Send him out to the AFC. Don't got to see him next year, possibly ever again, and then
Yeah.
just let him play out his sunset of his career. So people were talking. Oh, go
And
ahead. Go ahead.
one other note, they hired Nathaniel Hackett as their offense coordinator.
Which we went through last year.
Yes. Yes.
So that's
So,
exciting. We get to
yeah.
play. We do that whole thing again. It's like the rest of development meme. It didn't work for them, but maybe it'll work for us. So yeah, I just think they have quite the team, and they're poised to compete should they have a decent quarterback, which could be Rodgers.
Mhm.
So a trade package for that is like I guess my hopeful trade package, like that
Garrett
I've
Wilson.
of course, but they're not trading Garrett Wilson. Um, is this year's first, this year's second, and Elijah Moore. That was like thrown around Twitter for a while, but I just think that that is a great haul for what the Packers need. Like they get 13 to go with their pick at 15, and then 44 before their pick at 46, and then a very good slot receiver in Elijah Moore. I've been on the Elijah Moore stand train since he was drafted. I think he's quite good. Um, and he's not thrilled with the Jets. I think that might be better phrased as he's not thrilled with Zach Wilson because
Yes.
nobody likes Zach Wilson in New
Yes.
York. But if he's still willing to leave, I think that if the Packers could get him, I think that'd be a huge boost to the Packers offense to go with Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs next year. Like, just I won't call him a veteran. He's only a third year guy going into next year, but he's pretty good. I think
Yeah.
he's got a lot of talent in the slot.
I like it. I mean, it, not to bring up the Favre parallels again, but it's certainly a line that it feels like it's the most QB ready, uh, or I guess biggest upgrade, I should say,
Oh
room for
yeah,
upgrade of the available uh, God teams that would go for a quarterback because they have a lot of pieces in place. And yes, you're taking away picks in this scenario, but they can probably live to afford it because they need a quarterback that can really send this
I
team over
think
the
that's
top.
the only reason they really had a bad year this year. It's just their quarterback play wasn't good
And
enough.
even then, they still played better than expectations. But the
Right.
problem was the expectations grew as they were losing the last six of or their last six of their
They were 7-3.
7-4.
Yeah, 7-4. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so like that's pretty damning.
Yeah. I think it's just how it was. Um, I'd love the Packers to have two first round picks again. Like last year they had Quay and Devontae Wyatt, or Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt. So two plus guys in my book. The last time they did was with Sean Gary and Darnell Savage, so they went like 1 for 2.
That has happened a lot under Gutekunst.
Yep,
The kind of like
happened
they have
twice.
21 and 26. Well, even
Yeah,
was it might have been his first year too, where they got a pick from someone, and I'm forgetting who. Oh, it was because they traded down. Never mind. That
yeah,
was a scenario that they already did.
yep. So Yeah, I just think was it the Kevin King trade where they traded down to get Kevin King at the first round of the second round? First pick of the second round?
Yeah, because that was the Marcus Davenport draft, right? Or am I mixing it up?
Sure.
Yeah.
No idea. I haven't heard that name in forever, dude. That's the Aaron Jones draft though. And
Oh, that's right.
Jamal Williams. Um so yeah, I just like the idea. Shocking. Breaking news. Bing, 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 bing. I like the idea of having two first round picks. Two first round picks, top 15 is just fine by me. Um, so there's that. If they're not willing to go for Elijah Moore, then just like two firsts and this year's second for them would work for me. I think you for sure either need you for sure need a first, a second, and a good player, or two firsts and a second. I think like that's my my draft hope, or like my return hope for Rodgers. Like I don't care the organization of those. I just want either two first round picks and a second pick, or I would maybe go third, but I'm hesitant because the Packers can't draft the third round anyways. So so maybe we don't go there. Or they're just two picks and a player. So that's been my just cadence pretty much since we've been talking about in the Discord. Join the Discord, GSPN.info.
Mhm.
Um, since we've been talking about it in Packers Pals. So should we move on to the next team?
Next team. Who
A
is it?
reunion.
Where are we spinning this globe and pointing our finger on?
Sin City, baby.
Oh.
Rodgers can go out in the desert and hallucinate all he wants with his best friend Devonte Adams. Devonte was interacting with fans this week on the Twitter machine, and I think Jordan, if you have it up, I think somebody asked, or was some like brand account asked where Rodgers is moving in Vegas, or what neighborhood he's moving to, and Devonte said mine, quote unquote mine, not Numac's neighborhood. I don't live in Vegas, but Devonte Adams' neighborhood. So
It's true.
I think same thing. It makes sense if he really likes Devonte Adams and wants to go back to playing with him and having a pretty good set of receivers there between him and Hunter Renfro and a couple of good tight ends that aren't included in this trade. Um, it would make sense.
It would make sense. Um, again, fits the criteria of what the Packers, quote unquote, are supposedly looking into when it comes to, I guess, debating a Rodgers trade. Raiders play in the West. Um, do they play them next year?
Who?
Do the Packers play the Raiders next year?
I don't know. I can look while you talk.
That would be an interesting wrinkle if that was to actually happen. But yeah, Rodgers played with Devontae Adams. There's the instant reason why that you'd want to play with him. Something different. Again, they need a quarterback. Not
They
like in the biggest way.
they do play the Raiders
They do play the
in
Raiders
Vegas.
in Vegas. Interesting. Um, so yeah, if that were to happen, I think that would be. I would want to play him if you. I'm
I
ready.
I don't know if I am. I see like the purpose of like why you want to play him. I kind of just want to be done with him. Like
Oh, of
that's
course.
the idea of trading with the Jets is that you're likely not going to see him again, and you don't got to
Yeah.
go through the whole far returning to Lambeau kind of thing that we did in 2009 or eight,
Yeah.
whichever one it
9.
was. Yeah, nine. So regardless, that's just how I feel on it. But I don't want to tank a deal because of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
of course. Yeah.
my trade for this, I think this is people are out on this player. And I'm pretty pro player on this player. But a first and the second. What? Listen, man. Your boy is exhausted. I'm powering through, podcasting for the
The-
people. I'm trying. A first for this year for the Raiders, a second this year from the Raiders, and Darren Waller.
mm,
I really like Darren Waller. I
who
think,
the Packers tried to get last year.
yep, they tried to trade for him last year.
Yes.
So I really do like that. Otherwise, two firsts from the Raiders this year, next year, and a this year second would be my preferred thing, as I mentioned earlier. But what makes this all interesting is if you can buy into my pitch here. The Raiders are trying to trade Derek Carr
Hmm.
because they don't want him anymore. The Raiders have the seventh pick in the draft this year. Tankathon, which does more than just NBA, in case you didn't know, has
Yes.
a mock draft and has the Raiders picking Will Levis, the quarterback out of Kentucky, at 7. But the Carolina Panthers, who also need a quarterback, pick 2 picks later at 9. So what if the Raiders trade Derek Carr to Carolina for the ninth pick, and then they trade one of those picks, 7 or 9, to the Packers for Rodgers, and then like pick and Darren Waller or pick and pick kind of thing.
I don't know who. It's an interesting scenario,
I think like that
but
we've seen that happen before, where NFL teams like do those trades to move around picks to get players. Like that's the stupidest analysis you've ever heard as a trading on draft night. But like we've seen it before. Like the Packers have done it, where they
yeah,
trade for a pick and then trade that pick and another pick to for something else or a player. Like it happened
yeah.
during Gutekunst's time.
I don't know who that would look worse for,
What do you mean?
because in the scenario, Carolina's drafting Will Levis
Correct.
or blank
Or insert
future
QB here.
quarterback. Yeah, it might be worse on the Raiders, but
I don't think it is because I don't think that team's so far away.
no, I don't think so either. And they're built for that reason. They're built to be. They're trying to be like the next Tampa or the next,
Right.
I don't know, team that just
And I,
puts all their chips in the middle and doesn't necessarily draft those players, but they make big trades for them.
I think the issue is for the Panthers is that they're at a bad spot right now for this draft. I'm sorry, Andrew, for your misery dealing with the Carolina Panthers. our
But
co
actually,
our co-host Andrew Snyder.
I would say though that they might be one of the best. I mean, it's not a high bar here, but they might be the best positioned team in the NFC South to win next year. They weren't that far off from this year.
I mean,
That
yeah,
division is not going to take
sure.
a lot of wins
8,
to.
9, 10 in the draft is Falcons, Panthers, Saints. So it's not a high bar. But I think like they just need a quarterback, right? And they already drafted a
Yeah,
rookie quarterback last year, Matt Corral, from I think he's Ole Miss, if I'm not mistaken. But the issue with the Panthers is that according to this mock, which I think is right-ish, they have Bryce Young going 2 to the Texans, CJ Stroud going to the Colts at 4, which I think is wrong. I think the Bears pick one of those quarterbacks first. Um, but then Will Levis at 7. After that, there is not a QB until 16 with Anthony Richardson from Florida. I'm not the biggest Anthony Richardson fan. I think
I love Scout Numac.
I just watched him enough, and I did like
I know.
because I saw him play against I think Tennessee. That's like that first game of the season when the Florida
Oh
upset
yes,
Tennessee,
yeah,
and that was like the huge win, like huge upset. And then Florida kind of just like fizzled out the rest of the year. And so I think he transferred a couple times too. I just don't think he's really all that in a bag of chips. So I think the drop off from Will Levis to the rest of the quarterbacks in the draft is quite significant, and that just leaves the Panthers in a worse spot at 9 if 3 quarterbacks are gone by then. So
yeah,
if you trade or if you just like trade your pick to the Raiders for 7, I think that is a much more palpable outcome for the Panthers than rolling in with PJ Walker or insert free agent quarterback here.
yeah.
Because that team isn't poised to do much next season, in all honesty. Like, they don't have a whole lot of stuff to look forward to next year. Like, they just don't. Like, DJ Moore has been trying to take that next step to be an all-pro wide receiver for years now.
Trying to take that next step out of that team.
Right, but
Probably.
he just hasn't like done anything, which like
Yeah.
I guess is a part of the issue with his quarterback being Sam Darnold and PJ Walker and
You can run through it. Sam Darnold, PJ Walker, Baker Mayfield.
who
The year
was
before that, Cam Newton made his
yeah
illustrious return. Um, who
like
was it before that?
I'm having trouble remembering.
It was a big name too,
I
right?
don't think it was. Now I gotta look. Now I gotta look. Let's see.
Matt Rule.
2020, right? Teddy
Yeah.
Bridgewater was their quarterback
Teddy Bridgewater,
for
Ted.
15 games. That was their quarterback. He was their starter.
And then they made another big.
Kyle Allen was their quarterback for a while.
I
That was
swear
the
there
year
was
Cam
another
Newton
one.
got hurt. Yeah, it's just tough, like right, like that's kind of the main thing for the Panthers. It's been a tough years since prime Cam Newton was their quarterback, and I think they just have a lot of chances for like they have a lot of youth in my mind, and it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense for them to get Rodgers
Oh,
because
it was Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was the big move.
yeah, that was 2 years ago. No,
Okay, I
no,
thought
that
it
was
was
this one.
last year that they did it too. He's
Yeah,
been on the
no.
Panthers for 2 years.
Oh, was it? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense because it was Baker was the move this offseason, Donald
Yes.
before that, and then Cam, and then Bridgewater. Okay, 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 okay.
Hmm.
So yeah, I like that idea. Take it or leave it. Uh, NFL. I think that'd be a good scenario for the Panthers to trade up to the Raiders, and the Raiders trade their picks to the Packers for Rodgers.
Yeah.
So, um, next one, just as like ideas. Like I don't really have too many pitches for these ones. I think we're like those are my two big ones, were the Jets and the Raiders. But I think other teams that could trade for Rodgers, Buccaneers, I think certainly could trade for Rodgers. They're a team that's poised to compete right now.
Yep.
Man, would I hate watching the Buccaneers win a championship with Rodgers? That would just hurt me dearly. But um, with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and that line being healthy this year would be the biggest thing, along with just that stout defense. I think they'd be just fine competing with Rodgers next year, which would put that NFC South out of the reach of those other three bottom scraper teams.
Yes. Yes. Biggest thing is they cleaned house with everyone but Todd Bowles apparently. So I don't even
Yeah,
know where they go with from
right.
there.
Um, we talked about the Panthers, probably not. Titans,
Yep.
probably not because they got Malik Willis. I doubt they invest in picks to trading him when they barely got to see him this year. Um, maybe the Commanders. Commanders would be an interesting wrinkle because they need a quarterback. They're not trotting out Carson Wentz or probably not Taylor Heineke either. Because that, as much as Heineke's like been good in spots, he hasn't really proved himself to be a winner, which is
No.
tough because that team is just you get it. So, um, but other than that, not too many other teams like the Saints maybe, maybe.
Colts.
Who?
Colts.
Oh, I thought we
Colts.
talked about them.
No.
Nope, we didn't. Colts would be an interesting one. They pick four. Um, not me salivating over the idea of Packers having the fourth pick in the draft. That'd be pretty dope, in my opinion. Like, I I'm all about picking at four if the Colts want to trade four and stuff. Like, maybe they look if Bryce Young and CJ Stroud go 1-2 and they need a quarterback. Like, hey, maybe instead of drafting Will Levis, they trade for Rodgers. But that's kind of depending on how the new coach probably wants to build this team. How the Jim Irsay and the GM want to build their team. Like, do they want to win
That is
now or do they want to win
the
in the
I think he
future?
wants to win now.
Yeah,
Jim Irsay.
yeah, because like Michael Pittman and Paris Campbell and Jonathan Taylor are all good. So is DeForest Buckner on the defensive side. They still have Stephon Gilmore. Like I think that they just have the tools, but I think that might be a coaching issue because they've had the tools for a couple of years now, right? Like that was the biggest thing last year is that when they got rid of Philip Rivers, who after they lost, I think week 18, yeah, because they had to beat the Jaguars to get in, and they didn't.
Yes.
So they missed the playoffs by one game 2 years ago. and they were horrendous this year.
This year.
So I think it might be just a coaching issue for that team, but who really knows, honestly? So it's certainly a thought experiment as to how the Colts want to proceed with their franchise, and if they want to go young and compete for the future, have a franchise quarterback for the next 15, 20 years in CJ Stroud or Bryce Young if they get there, or if they want to try and compete now with Rodgers.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea.
I don't either.
Um,
I think they lean future because like
it would be the move.
it'd be the in my mind probably correct move. Like you pick at
Yeah.
4, you have a chance if they're there to pick a really good quarterback between Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. Um, but it's kind of like what do you want to do? What do you want to do?
Yeah.
Maybe we're getting into like NFL analysis now, but maybe the Bears draft Bryce Young or CJ Stroud and trade Justin Fields to the Colts for 4. Wouldn't that be the Bears doing smart things? Wouldn't that suck? But like, if they're gonna
It
pick a
would make
quarterback,
sense.
that'd be the smart thing to do. Like, I don't think you give up on Justin Fields right now. The Bears have the most money in free agency this offseason. They're gonna spend, spend, spend. I don't think you move on from Justin Fields. NFL brain says you do. What the what the Cardinals did with Josh Rosen, moving on from him to go to Kyler Murray.
Hmm.
I just think that might be where this is headed, even though I think Justin Fields ought to be the starting quarterback of the Bears next year. And they shouldn't draft the quarterback.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I'm more quarterback is the last thing you get. You get me?
Agree. Like,
Yeah.
100% agree. But when you have the first pick in the
Yeah.
draft, you you kind of have to go
You have to think
quarterback
about it. Yeah.
because you can always keep them around through franchise tags and extending them, whatever. But I get the point. It just is hard to get. It's hard for all of that to line up,
Hmm.
which is the nice thing about free agency for the Bears. Which again, yeah, if the Bears have a kick-ass free agency, kind of fill their needs with receiver. They have a lot of holes. Don't get me wrong, but they have like $90 million in free agency.
The problem though is that you could use the having that much of cap space could mean someone bilks you big time.
Yeah,
You know what I
like
mean? I
you
know.
give too much money to one player who's like not worth it.
I think the example of last offseason was Christian Kirk to the Jaguars, and everybody's like, "Oh my god, look at this
He
massive
played well
overpay."
this year, but yeah,
He played very well, but for every time that has worked out, there
oh
are
yeah,
multiple examples of like,
there's
what
the
do you?
Albert Hainsworths of the world.
Yeah,
Bless
sorry
you.
for my sneeze,
You're
as
good.
I'm trying to make a point. Yeah, that is a prime example, or like it's more dangerous to have especially to have the most cap space because
Right.
you're look everybody's like, okay, you have to pony up if you really
Right.
want me.
Right. But no, they have $100 million in cap space. Like that's
Ooh.
a lot to do with to fill the holes they need.
And they need at least 3 receivers because
Right.
Chase Claypool is their best, and I don't know if there's anyone else outside of what's his name?
Equanimous St. Brown.
Mooney.
Mooney.
Yeah.
um. So yeah, I think that it'll just be interesting to see. I'm curious to see where he lands if he does get traded. I think all of those options are better than us keeping him from the Packers perspective, just because we saw how this last year went. I know some people in the Packers fandom wanted to stay because he's just a great football player and just hate to see him go. Hate to see him go, but love to watch you leave kind of thing. Like it's just, I think it's time. We've litigated that for a while, and I think that's really all there is to it.
Yeah.
Jordan, anything else, buddy?
No, we'll be here. We'll be here talking about the latest Aaron Rodgers news. Aaron Rodgers news when
when it
he
drops.
when he shows up on Pat McAfee in
Well,
some
no, I
South American country.
Jesus Christ. I really think to be open and honest with you guys, our listeners, that might be the last time we talk about Rodgers for that long
Until
until we get news. Like
yeah,
actual news. Because to give you a little rundown, give you a little peek behind the curtain, next week will be offensive grades for us and NFL awards predictions. The week after that will be defensive grades. Week after that is big time for franchise tag and transition tag candidates, along with the scouting combine preview. So because I think that'll actually be an interesting thing to see is who the Packers use their franchise tag on this year, if they use it at all. Don't have to use it.
yeah, that's the other thing.
Um, then the scouting combine is all week at the end of February. Then a preview for free agency. Um, then free agency news is the second week of March, and then reviewing of what the free agency market looks like once the Packers have signed, if they sign any at all, given their cap space. League meetings, and then start for the draft. Draft is April 24th, so that'll be pretty much all of April. So really isn't too much in there for talking about Rodgers
Fucking
besides
Raj.
his grades next week. So there's the peek behind the curtain for you listeners. You can put on your calendars what you can expect for every week.
That's a man. That's no Wizard of Oz.
Oh my god. One of the all-time peeks behind the curtain. But with that,
Top five.
couple promos for all you guys. Um, I think today, right? I believe no. When did Cruising drop? Today or yesterday?
Wednesday.
Cruising for a Bruising dropped Wednesday as they look into Keith Law's prospect grades. It's that time of year. Spring training is
Break
almost.
of the law, break of the law,
Oh my.
break it, Keith
Rob
Law.
Halford, be quiet. Um, you ruined my train of thought. Adam McKee and Andrew Snyder went through Keith Law's prospect list for like for the MLB and talked about it for spring training as it approaches near the end of the month when pitchers and catchers report. So that's up on the Cruising for a Bruising feed now. Win in Six also dropped yesterday, if I'm not
Thursday,
mistaken. Thursday. Today is Thursday.
as a
Today's
recording.
Thursday as we're recording. So Win in Six, brand news in your feed there. Go check that out. Chris is back. It's all good. Life is great. Bobby's gone. Not so great for a little
Jay
bit.
Crowder.
Jay Crowder may be gone, maybe here, maybe
He's still here. He's celebrating National Marquette Day with his alums.
on Saturday. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then Eurostep every early week, every week, usually Mondays. They talk about all the same stuff that we've talked about. How Chris is back, and Drew's playing well, Jans is playing well. Just all the Buck stuff as they prepare for the All Star weekend and the subsequent playoff push after that. So, make time for this. I believe uploaded recently, but I
Yes.
forget what it was about. It might have been the Fablemans, the
Fablemans, yes, correct.
Steven Spielberg like auto biopic, something like that, like story about his life. So, plus they talked about The Last of Us, first couple episodes of that, and Poker Face, which I believe is Apple TV's TV show.
Peacock.
Peacock, my B. But yeah, go check out My Time for This. Andrew and Adam do a great job doing all things pop culture over there. So, join the Discord, GSP.info to get all things Eurostep Podcast Network. And Repod, go join Repod. Join us over there talking about Packers, Brewers, Bucks, and pop culture across the board. And with that, folks, that is all for this episode of Talk of the Tundra. We'll be back in your feeds next week. Thank you for listening. And Jordan, thank you.
Thank you.